I think the managerial stuff is interesting to me. You mentioned there that he kind of announced while he was at Feyenoord that he's like the next Liverpool boss. And if you remember at that time, he was getting compared, wasn't he, to like Brendan Rodgers and that. People were getting ahead of themselves, you know, chatting that like he's another one who was obsessed with the ball, a bit utopian maybe in his perspective on possession-based football and all that. He's already talking that he's got the job before he comes in. And I think we would all agree that he's been virtually perfect, but I don't know about. I mean, I'm going to get into it when I do my one. But from your perspective, was there any like? I think outside Liverpool, there's been a lot of people who've been shocked by. I don't want to say how little of an impact Jurgen was having, but you just. I think a lot of coaches would have been able to manage this Liverpool team to 80 points plus. Basically, is what I'm getting at. I think looking at what Slot's done, you know, have you been surprised basically versus like the Jurgen hangover, if you get what I mean? Look at what happened with Wenger, look at what happened with Ferguson. I think everyone anticipated, a lot of people inside Liverpool as well anticipated a bit of a drop purely because Jurgen was leaving, even though he never kicked a single ball. You know, how's your take been on that?
Yeah, I think that's what I was alluding to before, because I just think, I understand when people say, well, all the players are still the same, and it was a plus 80 point season last year. Obviously, they fall off a cliff towards the end. But I just think when you're dealing with like personalities, different players who've kind of existed under a previous manager, where it is, I think, quite different. Certainly in terms of Jurgen's personality, I think to then come in and just almost bring that group together, galvanise them, and to deliver the performances on the pitch pretty much from day one, then I think that's just sensational stuff. I don't think the manager's had enough credit. I know he gets the LMA award, the League Managers Association award at the end of the season for the manager of the year. I expected him to get that because he wins the league. But I just thought through the course of the season, he never really got the credit that he probably deserved, to be honest. You know, there's a lot of revisionism around fans talking Liverpool down towards the end of the last campaign, but then all of a sudden talking them up, saying, well, of course he was going to do well, he's got Jurgen's squad. Well, that wasn't a lot of the chat towards the end of the season, you know what I mean? I remember it clearly, like everyone, to a man, pundits, fans, they all thought Liverpool would be nowhere near it. You know, some had them outside the top four. I know we can mock that a little bit when you look at what Gary Neville's predicted and stuff like that, but there was a lot of people who thought Liverpool would not be in and around the top four, just because I think there's almost an understanding that it does take a lot of time to kind of to integrate yourself into a bigger club. I thought it was quite interesting with the manager that sometimes, I know he doesn't really sign any players, but quite often what you'll see when a new manager joins another club, and this is back to the standards thing, they'll bring lads with them from the previous club. They'll go, well, I'll bring one or two because I know what they're like. You know, the good lads off the pitch, they've got good work ethic, decent on the ball, whatever it may be. They'll bring a couple in.
I hate it when that happens.
But it happens a lot. But I think it's back to a standards thing, where the manager clearly knew. I'm sure he rated what he was doing back in Holland and the teams he was up against, but he's made a few references to the quality of the league compared to this one. But I think he was under no illusion straight away, and that's why it was like, there's a standards thing in the Premier League, and there's a standards at Liverpool. And unfortunately, whilst I would have liked some of those players, or I did like them, they're not going to be able to cut it here. And there was no talk, there was no chat of it, was there? He wasn't really linked to anyone, bringing them along just to be part of it. So I think it all comes back to, if you want to play for this football club, if you want to represent them, then you're going to have to be absolutely tip top. So yeah.
Beth, anything?
Yeah, I think obviously I completely agree with you. I think there was a lot of talk last summer about Liverpool perhaps being at the end of a cycle, and like the same players who people have now said, like you say, obviously Mohamed Salah, he of course he's going to have a great season, but actually back in the last season that wasn't the talk. So I think he has absolutely defied expectations to do what he's done this season. How much more difficult will his job be next season, do you think? Because now Liverpool do have a target on the backs a little bit. There's no surprises. People know he's a great manager. Do you think next season it will be more of a challenge, or do you think, you know, potentially with it 3, 4, 5 of his own signings, Liverpool could be even better?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because with success comes expectation. I think he's done a lot of the hard things in terms of getting people on board. So you mentioned Salah there. I think there would have been, you know, I think Virgil and Salah and maybe one or two others, Alisson, would have been looking and thinking, right, you need to get me on side a little bit here to an extent. I'm sure, you know, they're all professionals and stuff, but I think he does that really well. Brings Salah into a room, talks about what his expectations are, but listens to Salah as well, and then they come to kind of some kind of mutual ground in terms of what they expect both from each other, really. I think the ability to go into the market should help him because you get to stamp your own kind of footprint on the team a little bit more. So that should help him. But we know from previous kind of years watching football, across different leagues, sometimes it doesn't always pan out that way. You get to bring players in, and it doesn't always go to plan, and people can come in and upset the apple cart and stuff. So we'll have to wait and see. But I think people will obviously be expecting Liverpool to be, there or thereabouts again. Obviously, they'll be expecting them to do a bit better in Europe. But the caveats are if they come up against PSG. But yeah, it should be a little bit easier because I think he'll have learnt loads. I think in this first kind of 9-10 months. And I think there's almost this thing now where there'll be a lot of players around Europe who will be desperate to be part of something. So I think if Liverpool come knocking on your door, there's a fair old chance that you're going to be interested, and that should certainly help the manager just get one or two in where he feels he can add a little bit. And I think there's some good footballers at Liverpool already, but I would not be surprised if there's maybe one or two outgoings or one or two lads next season that don't see as much football as we think they might, and it's just back to, if there's any marginal gain somewhere, I think this manager's prepared to make those decisions, even if they're a little bit harsh, they seem a bit, hang on, we really like that player. And the manager might like him as well. But if he thinks he can get another 5 or 10% elsewhere, and I think that sometimes there's maybe the difference between him and Jurgen. Not that Jurgen didn't have those standards, but I think Jurgen will be more inclined maybe to just have that loyalty a little bit more with certain players for maybe a little bit too long. I don't think you'll see that with Slot. I think if there's room for improvements, he'll make those decisions.